Hello, my name is Joan Masters, and I'm the Senior Project Director of Missouri Partners in Prevention. Missouri PIP is a statewide coalition of colleges and universities in Missouri dedicated to creating healthier and safer campus communities. As a statewide coalition leader, I spend a great deal of time talking with campuses about how to plan and implement prevention that is successful and can change a community. Often we get frustrated in prevention. We don't know if what we're doing is working, or we don't see enough of an impact right away to tell us that we need to continue our work. The strategic prevention framework is a planning model that really is the best place to start. The SPIF doesn't tell us what programs to implement, but it reminds us that we must be planful, organized, and strategic in how we implement our work on campus. It's a nonlinear strategic planning model involving 7 elements. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about assessment, which is typically the first step in using the SPIF to implement your prevention activities. So assessment is important because it helps us understand the context of what our students on campus are experiencing and how their experiences and behaviors are impacting their environment. And when we look at assessment for higher ed, especially in the SPIF, it's important to think about the unique things that make your community or just higher ed in general at colleges and universities unique. Overall, doing prevention in higher education is very unique because we have people who are in an environment that has long been celebrated as a time of experimentation. When we think about movies that we see about going to college, when we think about encouraging students to try different majors and to go to as many student organizations as possible, sometimes that translates into experimenting with alcohol and drugs. Certainly, that's not our intent to celebrate college as a time of experimentation, but it can happen for students. Additionally, we have students in our communities that are of legal age to consume substances and some that are not. That can get really confusing and cause some mixed messages in our community. Additionally, we have students that are coming from states and countries with varying laws on different types of drugs and alcohol. So it's important for us to find out what our students know about those laws and policies and what our expectations are. That's a form of data that we might look at assessment. Our work must be data-driven, but it's really hard to collect sometimes, which is really why we need to spend as most time planfully thinking about assessment and implementing our assessment plan. So we ask ourselves questions in the SPIF assessment. What are the problems and related behaviors? How often are they occurring and where are they occurring? Which population's experiencing them the most? And most importantly, what are the contributing factors? How are students' use of drugs or alcohol in our community affecting not only them, but our community as a whole? We need to think about the nature and extent of substance use problems and related behaviors and the existing resources and readiness of the community to address its problems. That's a really important part of data. Most importantly, we need to think about the risk and protective factors that influence the problems and behaviors in our community. I want to say just a bit about the fact that I get a lot of questions in my work sometimes with colleges and universities that say, well, we don't have a big survey, so we don't have any data to look at. There's data everywhere. We have data in individual conversations with our colleagues in conduct and law enforcement, the faculty that meet with students, our student success advisors or academic advisors that might be working with students. Students are telling them what they're experiencing. They're telling them how they're interacting with their environment. So it doesn't just need to be maybe strict survey data or law enforcement data or conduct data that really influence our work. And when we think about building capacity in the SPIF, we need to think about building the relationships with people that have available data and can tell us a little bit about how students are interacting with their world. So surveys are very important, statewide surveys, national data sets, maybe campus surveys that you have, but also challenge yourself to think about what conversations can you have with colleagues on campus that might give you the data that you need. I mentioned before that risk and protective factors are really, really important in assessment, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So risk factors are characteristics at the biological, psychological, family, community, or cultural level that precede behavior and are usually associated with a higher likelihood of negative outcomes of those behaviors, where protective factors are characteristics associated with lower likelihood of negative outcomes. I think about protective factors kind of like wrapping up that student's behavior in a very soft, warm pillow or bubble wrap that's keeping them from that harm, where risk factors are things that make something maybe a little bit more likely to happen or a little bit more likely to have a negative outcome. So when we're thinking about assessment, we should think about the data and how it tells us what risk factors are present, not only for individual students, but in our environment, which means, again, beyond that survey data, we have information maybe from our bar and restaurant community, maybe from our local police department that can tell us about what's happening within the greater context of our college community, where students are experiencing negative outcomes from drug and alcohol use in the community, where are hot spots, etc. Students in our higher education environment might be arriving on campus with previous trauma, lack of family support, or lack of knowledge about risky behaviors. That in and of itself, those three things are risk factors to make substance misuse or drug use more likely to be harmful to a student. And so we need to be asking students about their family history. We need to ask about their knowledge of alcohol and drugs, because we can't assume just because they use, they know about drug use and what its negative outcomes are. Most importantly, our campus and community environment should be protective for students, but most campus environments don't include those strategies in planning. We think a lot about one-on-one interventions and not necessarily about how we should assess the individuals that we are working with and how to create protective environments for those individuals through things like policy assessment, supportive programs on campus through student affairs or other areas on campus. I love assessment. I kind of nerd out about it, but I'm really excited for you to look more into the data on your campus, both contextually through surveys, but also contextually through the conversations that you have, and find out a little bit more about why things might be happening or who they might be happening to, which I guarantee will lead to more success as you implement prevention.